Howdy, all you Quaran-Streamers. Welcome to another edition of everyone's favorite show about staying at home and enjoying our favorite entertainments. I'm Senior TV Editor Gerrad Hall, and I'm joined today by critic Darren Franich, editorial assistant Omar Sanchez, and digital news writer Marcus Jones. Great to see all of you. How's it going?
Good. Great to see you.
How's it going?
Doing pretty well here. Weather's great, even though I'm inside, but taking it in from this view here. How's the baby?
Nice window view.
Yeah.
The baby is great. I assume that was directed at me.
Yes.
The baby is great, but I have to say, Gerrad, this is some like different strokes, different quarantines for different people thing.
Yeah.
You look very put together, and I feel like I kind of like had to leaf blow these clothes on me after a morning with my child. So I'm glad one of us is looking good, man.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. It takes a lot of work. But you guys, speaking of it is like our third month going into quarantine for some people, and I don't know about all of you, but I have been burning through the content on a long list I had to watch during quarantine. But sometimes you want to give your eyes a break and let your ears do a little bit of the work, which brings us to today's subject, podcasts. Darren, you cover film and TV for EW, so it's no surprise that your pick is related to all things scripts, and you've been a guest on it, so please do tell.
Yes, maybe a little bit biased, but my pick and really the main podcast I've been listening to in quarantine is Screen Drafts, which is hosted by Clay Keller and Ryan Marker, a couple pals of mine who used to be video store clerks, and they've now kind of created a kind of video store of the mind with their show Screen Drafts. Each week, guests come on, they create a best of movies list. It could be something recent, it could be something steeped in film history. EW's own Maureen Lee Lenker was on recently with a great list of 30s Warner Brothers movies, but they're also currently, for those of us who are subscribers to the Patreon, they're going to be drafting the films of the Twilight series coming up. So, for those of us film lovers who, after, as you said, 2 or 3 months, might actually be getting down to the bottom of the list of movies we always meant to get to, each week of Screen Drafts, it gives you at least 7, if not more, movies to watch, which we all need a lot of movies to watch in this time, for sure.
Sure do. A lot to pick from. And video store clerks, many of them have like encyclopedic knowledge of things out there. So they are certainly a good resource. You mentioned Twilight. Darren, the important question, Team Edward or Team Jacob?
I was Team Michael Sheen the whole time, actually. I forget. He was like the main,
Michael Sheen.
He was the main evil emperor vampire, part of the Volturi. He seemed like somebody that you wanted to settle down with. No offense to Jacob, all offense to Edward.
I like that answer a lot. Marcus, your pick also focuses on writing, but of a different kind. What is it about And the Writer Is that makes it a podcast you keep going back to?
Right. So And the Writer Is a podcast about songwriting. The two hosts, well, the main host is Ross Golan. He's famous, of course, for writing Dangerous Woman, the title track of Ariana Grande's third album. Very good album. Highly recommend it. And his producer's Joe London, who's written songs like Wiggle by Jason Derulo, Die a Happy Man by Thomas Rhett. So they really know what they're talking about. But more importantly, the songwriters they bring on just have these incredible stories about songs you all know. One of my favorites is they had the late Allie Willis on, who's definitely known for writing the Friends theme song. Mm-hmm. But it might not be known that she is a white woman who is a co-writer on September by Earth, Wind, and Fire.
That's wild.
So she had range, and it was quite a beautiful thing. But also a lot of artists write their own music. So sometimes Ross and Joe have people like Charlie XCX, Nick Jonas, BB Rex on to also talk about it as well. I think it's really interesting to listen to right now because do you know about the versus battles that are happening on Instagram?
Oh yeah, and Instagram, big thing going on.
Exactly. And I personally think the fun part about that is finding out songs you didn't know that the artists were involved with. Mm-hmm. So my favorite, maybe controversially, is I didn't know Little John produced Blow the Whistle by Too Short, which is the song maybe the adults watching this should check out. I don't know if any kids watching this. It's stuff like that. So it's if you find you're listening to songs and want to know more about them and sort of figure out who's been making or producing all the music that you're really interested in The Writer Is really introduces you to a bunch of people, and they've had a couple quarantine episodes now where they've just talked to songwriters about like how they're writing songs over Zoom and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I definitely highly recommend it if you listen to music.
Yeah, and it's crazy too when you listen to this show or just even, casually come across things like you mentioned BB Rexa. She's written a lot of songs for a lot of people. Alicia Keys does the same thing, and you kind of wonder like, why didn't they just record these songs for themselves? But yeah, I truly find my mind blown a lot by discovering that who wrote some of these songs for other artists. It's kind of crazy, but that is a great suggestion. And if this show was a podcast, right here is the part where I'd read a message from our sponsor, granted in a much slower and more subdued tone, as many podcasters do. But since we are a streaming show, we're just going to cut to commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Quaran-Stream, the podcast edition. Now, if you're just tuning in, we're discussing the audio-only shows that we're currently enjoying. Omar, true crime and podcasts go together like peanut butter and chocolate, which is only making me hungry. But what about your pick? Son of a Hitman jumped out at you as something unique.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail right on the head there. I think right now, true crime really is going to fit the bill alongside pop culture podcasts because people are trying to find out more about what they like in pop culture, and Woody Harrelson's past is something that we really haven't really looked into. But Son of a Hitman on Spotify is an investigative series hosted by Jason Kavanaugh that's actually looking at the life of Charles Harrelson, the father of Woody Harrelson, who got convicted of assassinating a federal judge back in the 80s. And what's really good about this podcast is it's able to build the myth of Charles Harrelson. Here's this guy who's hated by his community in Texas. He's notorious for being a gambler. He's notorious for being a womanizer. And he's murdered people, yet he's still free. It's something that you couldn't even imagine right now. But what's really interesting, it's able to pose the question of whether that 1980s arrest was actually the town trying to gang up or stack the decks against Charles to try to get him in jail because everybody didn't like him. It's actually really similar to a documentary that I really liked last year that's streaming now on Sundance Now called No One Saw a Thing. It's a rural town that everybody had a hush rule about them killing a town bully that they had. They really didn't like, and they kind of just want to discard him. So it's really a slice of rural America in the 70s and 80s that you really don't see, and I really appreciated it coming from this podcast.
And maybe in some ways really informs more about what we know and love about Woody Harrelson and maybe some of the roles he picks. It's just a wild, wild story. For a lot of us, listening to podcasts has been part of our regular routine even before all of this happened, whether it's, driving to work or on public transportation or at the gym. But obviously a lot of that routine has been temporarily changed. So when have all of you been finding time to fit podcast listening into your daily lives now? I like when I'm on walks is when I'm listening.
I have a 2 foot tall, 25-pound roommate who I get to spend a lot of my day with now, and he's wonderful. He's so wonderful. But every now and then, podcasts are kind of a nice thing to have on in the background, just as a little escape. We're not really showing our son that much TV or screens of any kind right now, but audio's fine. He's kind of learning interesting new words. So that's most of my podcast intake is hanging out with our son and just wanting a little audio getaway while I'm trying to teach him how to walk and stuff.
Yeah. Omar, how about you?
Yeah, well, actually, weird enough, I have been trying to, during this pandemic, try to get back on my video game. I am trying to go back and at least play the games that I haven't beforehand or haven't had the time. So weirdly enough, I actually tried to put the volume down on my PS4 and just listen to a podcast while it's going. It's a very interesting experiment in multitasking, but it's worked out so far.
Yeah, you're working some different areas of the brain there for sure, all at the same time. Yeah. Good luck with that. Marcus, how about you? When are you listening?
Well, yeah, I'd say like Omar, I like to listen to podcasts while I play video games, but it's more the app Two Dots that's on my iPhone. I just kind of like switch back and forth, play some puzzles while in between watching TV shows whenever I need a break. But yeah, part of my daily routine already was like when I would cook breakfast or be inside during the weekend, just kind of chilling out. I'd always just throw a podcast on, and it fills the silence. I live alone, but also it makes me smarter. I get some knowledge in there.
That is so true. But just be aware, if you talk back to the podcast and it talks back to you, there's something wrong. So that's a whole other issue.
I won't say that happens too often, not too often.
Every now and then. All right, you guys. Well, we have come to the end of another episode of Quaran-Stream. And if this is anything like the podcasts I listen to, 11 down, 500 to go. I'm your host, Gerrad Hall. Huge thanks to Darren Franich, Omar Sanchez, and Marcus Jones for joining us on this journey. We'll see you very soon on Quaran-Stream. And until then, stay safe and stay inside.